Do you have a hope that is bigger than any pain you could face? That's what we're going to address today on Flourish-Meant. I'm your host, Tina Yeager. Flourish-Meant is part of the Spark Media Network and can be heard on the Edify app. Today, I have with me filmmaker Jim David, and he is a skilled storyteller and a award-winning filmmaker whose work has received, among many awards, 2 regional Emmys. So Jim is now working on a feature-length documentary about a hope that is bigger than the pain of our world, and it features real people who demonstrate the importance of being eternally focused, even in the midst of pain and suffering. Welcome, Jim. I'm so honored that you're on Flourish-Meant today.
Thank you, Tina. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Tell the listeners why you chose to zero in with all the awards that you've gotten on the different kinds of film and storytelling projects that you've done. Why did you choose to begin this project on hope that's bigger than suffering and pain?
This project started in so about maybe more than 15 years ago with a family that was in our small group that had lost 2 young adult sons in their life. And so it was just a terrible tragedy that just watching them had really, watching how they leaned into the Lord and how they were walking with a faith that I had never seen before. And it was super hard. And you could just see that they were leaning into a strength that was not their own. And that always stuck with me. It will stick with me the rest of my life. And fast forward to another story I did a couple years ago with a gentleman that was dying of cancer, and we knew him through our life. My son was attending a camp of his, and so he had an incredible story of just how he was drawing to the Lord through that. So never would have imagined I would be walking along, working with someone that also was going through something similar to what I had seen years ago. And as we were doing that story, as we put it together, and it was meant to be a lot bigger than it was. It ended up being a shorter story. And we submitted it to film festivals, and watching the impact that it had on people, and people kept telling me, I want to see more of this. This is stuff that we want to talk about, but it's hard to. And so, I wanted to show the stories of how God was working in the lives of people today. This is not just stories from the Bible of 2,000 years ago, but that God is actually actively working in hearts and today that's hard to believe sometimes, because you can really see a strength that's bigger than a human, what people would do from a normal human reaction. So we were, that was what kind of, culminated the beginning of doing this bigger feature and looking at lives of people that were actually going through some really hard times.
So you were able to see a couple of examples that showed how faith was like the toe holds and the finger holds in the side of a very dangerous and scary cliff of pain and suffering and potential death and loss and crisis. And you decided you wanted to share that opportunity for people to see how they too could anchor themselves in the midst of impossible situations.
I did. I think, there's one thing to just talk about, this is what the Bible says, and this is what our faith says. And it's another thing to say, okay, this person's living it out, and they're living it out like a life of Joseph, like really hard. And you're like, okay, there's something a lot bigger to life than we tend to look at things on a temporal basis. I think even, we're continually drawn to that versus the eternally focused. And the one thing I've seen is that when people are going through these hard times, they get eternally focused, and the depth of their relationship with the Lord is incredible to behold. And I wish it wasn't so, but clearly in this broken world, the Lord is drawing people to himself through these events. And I think in the end, they end up being like spiritual heroes, because you're like, this is really what life is all about, right? Getting to know the Lord more. I think we get lost along the way sometimes.
I love that you said that it's a broken world that's at fault for the suffering. Sometimes it's our natural proclivity to start blaming something, someone, anything. And a lot of people are inclined to say, well, God is sovereign. God must have caused this suffering. But I love the way that you're talking about this being part of living in a broken world. And yet God uses those times of suffering that could destroy us and instead does something completely unexpected in that. Can you think of one of your favorite examples of when God did something unexpected during a dark time in someone's life that you interviewed?
Well, one of the people, several people that I'm interviewing, and they all have incredible stories. And I've one of the families that I'm interviewing lost a son 5 years ago, 20-year-old son, tragically. And in the film and during our interview process, Becky and Darren Frame are communicating that they wouldn't want to go, they wouldn't sign up for this, they wouldn't go through this, they wouldn't want to go through this, but they also wouldn't trade the depth of their relationship with the Lord that they've learned through this walk. And, she says it with tears, and it's a hard walk, but at the same time, it's a walk that they've learned has such richness to it. And that's not a normal thing. That's not a normal human reaction. So when you see that, you're like, okay, the Lord is clearly doing something special here. And it is a broken world. And, while he doesn't cause these things, there's the sin and death brought all of this into our world. And the Lord allows these things into our lives, and he uses them for his glory. He uses them for I think, where for eternity, and, where the whole purpose of this lifetime is just a short bit, of what life is all about, spending eternity with the Lord. And so I think when we look in terms of that eternity focused mindset, then you start to see it, and you talk to these people and you see it. And I want people, I want that real life example of how God is walking with people today. And my hope and my prayer is that people seeing this will be drawn to the Lord, and will want to know him better, and will want to press into him, and establish those communities around ourselves, and establish that depth of a relationship with the Lord, and look more that way.
When you're looking for who you'll include in this project, because there are a lot of people who've been through pain and suffering, how do you choose which stories to feature?
That's a good question. And there's a lot that goes in behind the scene as far as how to do that. Well, the simple way I would answer that right now is we're looking for people that can also communicate it. There is so many different kinds of pain and suffering, I think, in ways that the average person doesn't always understand, like who their fellow friend or their colleague is and what they're dealing with. But we wanted to tackle issues. I just got done interviewing John Seidel, and he wrote a book called Finding Rest, and he's been dealing with the loss of his stepdad, his sister, and his own struggle with mental health, and how he has leaned into the Lord and found just incredible strength in God through all of that. So we want to tackle that aspect, and we're looking, we're going to be interviewing someone that's suffered abuse from a parent, and people that have had emotional trauma from losing the death of a child, and people that are going through cancer. And we're trying to, it's not just going to be physical, it's physical, emotional, and it's mental, and a lot of different, there's so many different kind of sufferings that people go to. And we want people to see that God has worked, and people that have pressed into the Lord, people that have, and I'm learning so much through this process as I've talked to people. And as I was just talking to John Seidel 2 weeks ago, I was in Texas, and, he's using the example of Job, and he's like, everyone talks about how how Job got things back at the end, but what he really got was more of God. And I just thought that's awesome. So, I never heard it quite put that way before. And so that's, one of many things that I take away from that interview. So, those things help me in my own walk as I walk with these people and, and explore this, with their trials and their trouble.
We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back to Jim David, filmmaker, storyteller, we are going to find out which pieces of these people's stories that he's highlighted have really touched him and helped him to better understand how to get more of God in the midst of pain and suffering, how to have hope bigger than the pain. So we're going to look for his big takeaways, and we will be right back. Meet the Christian who married faith with true crime, Lori Morrison. Lori is a person of faith, a private investigator, and the producer of the award-winning podcast, The Unlovely Truth, where faith and true crime intersect. Lori and I would like to invite you to join the True Crime Mission Fields program, a life-changing opportunity exclusively joining Christians who have married faith and true crime. Featuring Chaplain Lori Prather, the products within the True Crime Mission Fields program allow you to connect your passions and skills as Christians with practical service opportunities within the world of true crime. You will begin to serve people in difficult circumstances and have a greater impact in this world than you ever imagined possible. Access your free report, Meet the Christian Who Married Faith with True Crime, and receive up to 70% off of any collection when you use the link in the show notes. And we're back with storyteller and award-winning filmmaker Jim David. And we are going to dive right in and ask him what his biggest takeaways were from the people that he interviewed to help anchor you as a listener in hope that's bigger than any pain or suffering that you could be facing. Jim, what are some of your biggest takeaways? What are some of the things that you saw that really stood out to you from the people that you interviewed, the things that you took home and made part of your own life?
Well, there are so many, and believe it or not, it's going to be hard to end up with just like 2 hours of an entertaining documentary from all this, because there is so much richness in what people are sharing. But one of the biggest takeaways, I think, is community, and that we tend to try to, walk through our life more without having a healthy community of believers that are with us, that are walking with us. And it's, when those hard time comes, when those moments happen, the one thing I'm seeing with all of these people is that they have a community with them that they can lean into, that have helped them, someone that's helped them. And now they want to help others. Everyone's always asking, what is it for me to glorify God through this? What does that mean for me? And for so many of them, it's pouring themselves back in to help others that are going through these problems, because so many people are walking around with hurts and struggles that they don't want to, that they want to talk about, and it's very hard. And I'm hearing people tell me that we want to talk about these problems, and yet when they walk into rooms, some people, they walk away because they're uncomfortable. They don't know how to approach people that have had, serious trauma or suffering, or if they bring it up for the first time. And so I think people get uncomfortable sometimes because they don't know how to talk to other people about it. And we want to make that more, commonplace. We want to make that discussion happen because so many people want to talk about it. That's what I'm hearing over and over, and the need to have community in our lives. And so that's one of the big takeaways. Like I said, there are many.
So community in two respects is what I'm hearing you say, both that it'll support you, but also that you can give back to your community. And then I guess there's a third way that you're talking about too, bringing awareness of how to respond to those who've been through trauma, crisis, and suffering.
Absolutely. I think if we take maybe this can also help people maybe be more aware and say, to approach someone and like, ask them, not while they're just walking down a hallway, but, to just say, how are you? Is there something I can do to help? Or, and we're going to talk about lament. It's okay to be sad. You don't want to stay there forever, but it's okay to say, this really stinks, and I'm sorry that you're going through this. And a lot of times, again, everyone that I've talked to, that just throwing a Bible verse at it and walking away isn't really helping anybody, is that there's a whole book on Lamentations in the Bible. And when Moses died, the whole nation of Israel spent 30 days mourning his death. I mean, these are things that I don't think the church does a very good job of collectively from a very large scale. And so we want to talk about these things because there is so much need for I think this kind of ministry, and for people to see that the Lord does meet us here. And he doesn't just meet us here, but he pulls us out and he brings us to a relationship that's just so much stronger than what we had if we, trust him, if we actually, seek him. And several people have said, if you're actually angry at God through something that you're going through, that's actually a good thing, because you're engaging him. It's when you just leave him and when you walk away, but it's when you engage the Lord and when you actually are, you can ask questions, and that's very different than questioning God, just saying why. And so we want, the people that have been through this have, in the end, are really incredible stories of how they've grown closer to the Lord through this. And that's, I think from people that don't know the Lord, that's just not a normal response. People get angry and bitter, and we see lives fall apart when things happen to them, when they don't have a hope and they don't have a God that they can trust, that can actually, really deliver and through helping them through these problems.
So this hope that you are featuring in your documentary, and that the stories that you have listened to is highlighting, you're talking about a hope that isn't just a happy hope. That's not a Pollyanna type hope. It's a hope that is, God is with you in the middle of your pain, and he cares about you, and he cares enough to hear the lament of your heart, to hear the anger and the frustration about what has happened to you, and to still love you through it. That's a great hope, isn't it?
It is. It's a lasting hope. It's a real hope. It's not just a feeling hope. It's something that, you can take to the bank, right? And it's like the faith that I'm seeing with the people that have been through this, it's awe-inspiring. And it, I think it's hard, even if you're not a believer. I want this film to be seen by people that aren't even believers, because I want them to say, well, how are they doing that? Like that's, because we've never been able to fully understand, right, why God allows these things to take place. But when you look at that, you're like, I also can't understand how God is working in this person's life so supernaturally. That's amazing too. And so, we want to kind of pose that new question instead of trying to answer the old question.
Right. Because God is with us in our suffering. And you can see that in the depths of suffering that you're featuring in these people's interviews that you're doing in your documentary.
Yeah, these are all people that, are walking the talk, and and can, they're their own, they're real life stories of people that are crying out to the Lord on how can I get through this, and their stories of how they came through it, stronger, and with a relationship with the Lord that I think can be mind-boggling, from to really show, wow, the Lord is Charles Colson said, it's how, the hope is how God is working in the hearts of believers. And so we want to show these hearts that God is actually working in them. It's not just, words, that the Holy Spirit, God is working in people's lives today. And we want to show that this is evidence of that, and to make people want to know more about how they were able to do that. And again, provide that, hopefully help other people ask questions and talk about this more, so that they can they can learn for themselves, and they can, reach towards that hope, that we can see in other people.
So I'm hearing you focusing on not just the circumstances, because a tendency when you're in suffering and pain is to only focus on the pain, only focus on the suffering, only focus on the immediate circumstances. That's our natural human tendency. If you have a splinter, if you have a broken limb, you're only going to zero in on that. But incredibly, the people that you are highlighting were able to instead focus on the presence of God with them, that they weren't alone. And it wasn't about the circumstances, it was about who was carrying them through the circumstances.
Yeah. And, a lot of them have, it's a great comfort for them to know that we have a God that walked suffering on this earth. He's not just, he is an example. And on the cross, he cries out, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" And he, one of the people I was just interviewing, John Seidel, had said, and he knew the end. He knew how this was all going to end, but it still wasn't, the process, wasn't enjoyable. But they took rest in knowing he does know the end, and the Lord knows where this is all going to end. And he knows that he's creating, like we're going to have a richness and a relationship with the Lord that we were supposed to have, that we were designed to have, that we can't have here on this earth. And so, and it's not just, a story that, lives don't turn around like this, it's not just a once here or way over here, but this is consistently in different people's lives on how they have actually, endured this and said, wow, I have something greater than I had before this happened. And the gentleman that we did that started all this, he said, I wouldn't, if it meant my cancer would be gone, but I would have to lose the relationship that I have with the Lord, I will keep the cancer and go see him now. And so when you see that kind of relationship, I mean, and he started off with his story saying all our races are almost over, whether we live 20 years, 40 years, 90 years, it's all going to go by really fast. And so when we look about why are we here, what is our purpose for life, I think that hope, like you said, it's a real hope, and it gives us purpose for why are we getting, who are we going to talk to today? Who are we going to interact with? who can we help today? Instead of thinking like, maybe just about some temporal things that just, are more, personally focused.
Yeah, because our hope is sometimes centered on my purpose for today is to be as comfortable as I possibly can. And we're not really thinking that way consciously, but
Right.
That's what drives us, is we really
Right.
just want to be comfortable. And, life isn't comfortable all the time. And great purpose doesn't always come out of what's comfortable. Sometimes it comes from the places where we experience the most tension and conflict and even suffering.
Yeah, I have a 7-year-old, and he, as much as I wish he could just learn these lessons without struggle. I mean, it's actually, as a parent now, it's amazing to see, because virtually 95 or 100% of everything he learns comes when he resists, when he struggles, when he doesn't want to do something. And so when you see that, and I think for me, I realize that we live in a broken world, right? Our natural tendencies are for us. And so I think when we see that, when I see for myself as a dad, and I realize what I'm trying to teach him, it helps me understand more of maybe just an inkling of what God is trying to do for us, knowing that this is not our final home.
And being focused on that eternal mindset really does give hope beyond what you're experiencing right now. Because if this is not all there's a hope in that, isn't there?
There is. And while I was doing some of these interviews, when I was working with Steve, the gentleman that the short story we did on the gentleman with cancer, I had a hearing. I have significant hearing loss, and I had a surgery on my ear that was supposed to make it better. And it was ultimately, we were going to have both ears come back to normal hearing. And there was a complication from that surgery that made my hearing worse. And so, I struggled with that. I was angry with the Lord for a while, trying to figure out, why is this happening to me? I'm a filmmaker. If I feel called to do this, you're making my job harder. Meanwhile, Steve is telling me he's thanking God for cancer. And I was like, okay, my priorities are just something's not right. And the Lord helped me see, maybe my hearing was fixed because it became more eternally focused, and my hearing was more, I started hearing more from the Lord than I did just all this ambient noise around me. And so, I'm praying for God to fix my hearing, and maybe he actually did. So, that's how I see it. And I think that, none of us like to go through hard times. I wish I could have my hearing back, but, at the same time, I have a focus. I have a long way to go, but I have a focus that, that I'm grateful for.
Well, those are so many great takeaways, and I know that you have lots more, but do you have one specific thing that you would like to say to that listener out there that is in the midst of pain and suffering themselves, and they just want to know what is something they can do right now to find hope to get them through today and into tomorrow and to keep going?
Press into the Lord, spend time in his word if you're not doing that, but also seek out mature believers, and don't be afraid. There are so many places out there that have been through this, that want to help. And there are people, if you know someone that's been through a similar struggle, don't be afraid to go talk to them, because chances are, if they're handling it in a healthy way, they're going to want to talk to you. They're going to want to pour into you all that God has poured into them. So that would be, don't be afraid to talk about it. Everyone I'm talking to, I was blown away by how many people came to me and said, we want to see more of this. Because, the natural inclination is, I had someone say to me, well, if you're going to do a movie, it's called For a Purpose, and it is about hope. But if, it's not about, maybe it's not about a bunch of sad stories. That's not what this is going to be about.
And I love that. I love that you can take the stories of suffering and really keep that positive focus, that this is about God being with us and God caring about every moment that we're in and bringing joy and hope out of the most unexpected moments in our lives. So thank you for taking the time to do the hard work to bring these stories into the living rooms of people that need to see them, that need to know that no matter what they're going through, that they're not alone and there is hope. How can people get in touch with you and follow you and find this wonderful content that you have to offer about hope and all the other documentaries and projects that you have going on?
So they can, the number one place I send them is for this film. It's forapurposemovie.com. And, there's a place for people to sign up so that we can, keep them up to date. We're going to send them updates on people we're interviewing and the stories as we're creating this film and making it. We're going to share with them what we're learning along the way. So, we would really love for them to go there and join us on our journey, and just can pray for us as we, we're going to be looking for financial help to make this and all those things that go along with it. My personal site is jimdavid.com. And so they can go there, and the movie that I was referencing for the story of the gentleman that had cancer can be found on Redeem TV. It's called A Strong Finish. So if they want to type that into Redeem TV, they'll find that movie there. They can watch that there.
Well, to make this a strong finish, just like the title of that movie, let me just take a moment to thank all of the listeners for joining us for this time of honoring God's presence in the darkest moments of our lives. I hope that all of you were encouraged and inspired, and that you will go to Jim's sites and gain the inspiration that's going to help you get through any moment that you might face in your life with hope. And I hope, of course, also that you come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant.